A concern that the US-Israeli war on Iran could spread beyond the Middle East. Tehran promising retaliation after the sinking of a warship off Sri Lanka's coast. Washington has confirmed this strike. At least 84 people on board the Iris Dina were killed. Sri Lanka rescuers are searching for about 60 others who are still missing. The ship was targeted in international waters as it was returning from a naval exercise organized by the Indian Navy. Another Iranian ship is heading towards Sri Lanka's waters. Colombo saying it will put maximum effort into safeguarding this vessel. The president is reportedly in talks with officials on how to respond to requests from an Iranian ship for safe entry in its waters. Azerbaijan also reporting attacks. The nation that shares a border with Iran is saying it's preparing to retaliate after drone strikes on an airport and near a school. At least 2 people were injured. Within the region, the fighting now into its 6th day, Iran pressing ahead with retaliatory strikes on Israel and U.S. assets in the Middle East. The IDF says it has the ability to reach any location and strike any target in Iran. Tehran reporting the death toll from these days of attacks since the weekend rising past 1,000. The attack on the Iranian vessel sunk by torpedo fired from a U.S. submarine could be a headache for neighboring India. New Delhi has historical ties with Iran and currently a difficult relationship with Washington. We speak to Rebecca Bundhun in Mumbai for more on this. Rebecca, how has this attack, the U.S. attack on this Iranian ship, how is that being viewed by New Delhi?
It really does complicate the situation for New Delhi, which has been mostly taking a very neutral stance when it comes to the conflict. But with this sinking of Iran's warship off the coast of Sri Lanka, this puts the Middle East conflict right in India's backyard. This is its strategic neighborhood. And this does come after that ship was returning from naval exercises that were taking place in Visakhapatnam in South India. Iran's ship had been there at the invitation of India. So again, this is something that makes it more complicated. There is pressure on the Indian government to comment directly on this matter, but it hasn't yet said anything specifically on this sinking of that warship. There were comments from Prime Minister Narendra Modi earlier. Narendra Modi talked about the need for diplomacy and dialogue when it comes to ending conflicts, not just this one in the Middle East, though. He also referred to Ukraine. So again, avoiding that direct mention of this incident. We don't know how much or if any information India was given by the US in terms of this attack. There's certainly mounting pressure from opposition leaders in India for the Indian government to take a stronger stance with this incident.
Rebecca, the pressure will certainly build, given as well, in the last few days, we're looking at different countries within Asia dealing with disruptions to their energy supplies. India, the last few months coming under pressure from Washington not to buy from Russia. It might need to do that, given it might not get supplies from the Middle East.
Yes, that's right. And India is heavily dependent on the Middle East when it comes to both oil and gas. It imports more than 50% of its crude oil from the Middle East. It's heavily dependent on LNG supplies from the region as well. So this is putting pressure on India to look for alternatives. And analysts are speculating that could be Russia potentially, where it can secure potentially cheaper oil supplies come from. India has to meet the energy needs of its population of more than 1.4 billion people. Of course, as prices rise, that adds to India's import bill. And then that in turn puts pressure on the Indian rupee. And all of this also eventually has a knock-on effect when it comes to businesses and households. If crude prices rise and eventually these are passed on to consumers, to businesses, that eats into their profits, into people's expenses, pushes up inflation. Already we've seen reports that Indian companies are reducing supplies of LNG to industries. So it's already having that impact. And those worries about increased costs and the impact on the Indian economy because of this risk when it comes to securing energy.
Thanks, Rebecca Bundhun reporting for CNA Live from Mumbai. Let's bring in Blake Sifton. He's watching developments for CNA Live from Dubai. Blake, we just heard Rebecca there looking at how pain can spread on the economic front for India. We're looking at the spread geographically, the fighting not just confined to the Middle East now.
Good evening, Wei Su. That's right. With developments today, it does seem that this conflict is spreading to new areas, new dynamics and new fronts. As you mentioned, we had a drone and missile attack across the border in Azerbaijan for the first time today. 2 people were injured there, and authorities there said that they reserve the right to take appropriate measures. Of course, ongoing attacks in the Gulf with an oil tanker hit apparently 60 kilometers off the coast of Kuwait. A barrage of missiles intercepted over Doha, the capital of Qatar. And in Saudi Arabia, authorities say they intercepted more cruise missiles as well as drones. And the Iranian Revolutionary Guard says that they have struck Kurdish forces in Iraq. And now that is amid reports that Iranian Kurdish forces across the border are potentially gathering and preparing to enter Iran and to confront the Iranian regime on the ground, possibly with the support of Iraqi Kurdish forces. Now, we understand that among Iranian dissident groups, the Kurds are the most well-armed, the most organized, and they have thousands of men under arms. There are reports that the United States is perhaps preparing to support them and maybe to arm them, though the White House has rejected that report.
Blake, even countries or militant groups that are not immediately combatants in this 6-day conflict now have interest in de-escalating. Are we seeing efforts on other fronts to try to rein in fighting between the US, Israel on one hand, and Iran on the other?
Yes, that's right. We understand that China will send a special envoy to the region to help mediate and try to de-escalate the situation. The UK defense minister has also gone to Cyprus to try to contain diplomatic fallout there. That's after an Iranian drone struck a UK airbase in Cyprus after evading air defenses. Now, another major international impact of this conflict that has many countries concerned for the safety and well-being of their nationals is, of course, air travel and the disruption to air travel after airspace across the region was closed when the war began, and major transit hubs like Doha in Qatar, Dubai and Abu Dhabi grounded flights. And we are seeing some signs of relief there. Here in the UAE, they are beginning to operate a limited number of flights. Emirates Airline says that they will operate 100 flights in and out of Dubai between today and tomorrow. Fly Dubai as well is beginning to reintroduce their scheduled flights. And in another sign that perhaps the threat of Iranian missiles is maybe lessening and perhaps the flights will begin to resume more, Israel plans to operate to allow flights to leave Tel Aviv from Sunday.
Blake Sifton there reporting for CNA Live from Dubai.